Good evening, members, and good evening to any members of the public or the press that may be watching online this evening. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Councillor Steve Bartlett, and I'm the chairman of the BCP Overview and Scrutiny Board. So welcome to this special meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. With that, I'd just like to ask Claire if she would read out the housekeeping notes for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Agenda item 1, apologies. Do you have any apologies this evening?
Yes, we've got apologies for this meeting from Councillor Mark Howell and Councillor David Kelsey. Councillor Mark Howell is being substituted for by Councillor Felicity Rice, and David Kelsey is being substituted for by Councillor May Haynes.
Yeah, welcome, Councillor Haynes. Welcome, Councillor Rice. Nice to see you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests on any items on the agenda? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. In the decision by the Cabinet, it delegates authority to the Chief Operating Officer in consultation with the portfolio holder for People and Homes and the Chair of Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee to implement a competitive selection process to appoint an operator of a health hub service from St Stephen's Church Hall. I have told Councillor Mellor that I would not be on that committee as being chair of the Health and Overview Scrutiny Committee. If the health hub came to the committee, it would be inappropriate for me to scrutinise.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Sorry, Councillor Haynes, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, just for transparency, in the papers it does reference a Cabinet decision that was made back in May 2021. I was still on Cabinet then, but I understand that the item before us today is actually a slightly different item because it's got more details, and that was just an outline case. But I just wanted, in the interest of transparency, to make that declaration.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Sorry, Councillor Allen, sorry, is it? Hazel Allen, thank you.
I just want to make a declaration that I have a substantive post with the NHS, which does involve care of people that experience homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Okay, agenda item 4, public issues. Right.
There's no public statements, petitions or questions for this meeting, Chairman.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, so agenda item 5, which is a substantive issue for this evening's discussion, the scrutiny of the Homelessness Health Club and the call-in on a decision made by Cabinet. Just to give a little bit of a potted history on this, the idea of the Homelessness Health Hub was first raised in last year. In fact, it first came to Overview and Scrutiny on the 17th of May last year, and it was supported by Overview and Scrutiny, the principal of the Health Hub, strongly supported, I have to say. It then went to the Cabinet on the 26th of May, and there was a decision to proceed with the Health Hub in principle. A few things could be sorted out at that point, but essentially it was agreed to proceed in principle within an agreed budget. So moving on to this year then, on the 28th of February, the Overview and Scrutiny Board scrutinised another report that had been raised because there was due diligence carried out on the initial concept by officers, and there had been some escalation in the cost of the project. And the outcome of that was that there was some other options offered, but the Cabinet essentially were asked to make a decision and the ONS board, looking at the cost of the project, etc., came out with a recommendation. I'm going to read that out in a minute, what that recommendation was. So then it went to Cabinet on the 9th of March, and the Cabinet decided to proceed, despite the overview and scrutiny's recommendation at the time, and they basically gave a decision to proceed with a limitation on the cost to mitigate the cost risk to the council, assuming, of course, that a hub operator could be appointed as well. So the hub operator appointment was preceding the actual acquisition of St. Stephen's Hall. And it is that decision, that last decision, which is the subject of the call-in, which we'll be discussing this evening. And that's what we need to focus on as a board, the call, the decision itself and the reasons why it has been called in. Well, the preceding history actually is not at issue here. It is actually that decision made on that day. And I'm going to come back to those decisions and the recommendation by the Scrutiny Board in a moment. But first of all, there were some restricted annexes, and indeed part of the last Cabinet meeting, which the decision was made in closed session. And I'd just like to read this out, that was the recommendation and minutes from the last meeting and the Cabinet minutes, appendices 2, 3 and 4, were circulated as exempt documents due to their inherited status. There is no reason under paragraph 3, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act, information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, in brackets including the authority holding that information, close brackets, for those documents to remain exempt, and on the advice of the monitoring officer, they may be made public. However, with the exception of those items now redacted in those reports, of which you've been handed a copy of. Now, if you do want to discuss those items which are now redacted, we will have to go into closed session to discuss it. Okay? So please be very careful in the debate about what you say, particularly about financial figures, etc. And as I say, we can discuss it, but if we do, it will have to be in closed session. So now to the call-in. As I said, I think it's probably pertinent that I do read out the decision of the recommendation of the Overview and Scrutiny Board to the Cabinet, and then the subsequent decision made by Cabinet. So our recommendation, Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting held on the 28th of February, said this: whilst fully supported of the principles and purposes of the multidisciplinary team in supporting the homeless and the provision of a homeless reduction health centre, Health Hub, the Overview and Scrutiny Board recommend that A, the Cabinet reconsiders the purchase of St. Stephen's Hall, and the Council should continue its search for appropriate alternative premises to be acquired by either lease or purchase. And B, the Council explores partnership work on what is needed before progressing with the proposal. So that was the last recommendation to Cabinet. And the Cabinet decision, I think, was on the 9th of March, resolved that it delegates authority, the Chief Operating Officer, in consultation with the portfolio holder for People and Homes and the Chair of the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to implement a competitive selection process to appoint an operator of a health hub service from St. Stephen's Church Hall, and B, conditional upon the appointment of an operator, as set out in the recommendation A above, approves the acquisition of the St. Stephen's Church Hall and delegates the authority to the corporate property officer function in brackets, retained by the Chief Executive for the purposes of this acquisition, close brackets, the Section 151 officer and the monitoring officer to agree the specific terms of the acquisition of St Stephen's Church Hall, and C, approves an increase in the capital budget for the purchase and refurbishment of the property for the purposes of delivering a health hub service to a maximum sum of £800,000. Okay, so that is the decision which has now been called in. So, having said that, I'd like now to hand over to Richard Jones, who is our head of Democratic Services, to give us a brief on the call-in and what we should and shouldn't be talking about. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just for the benefit of those joining the call online and for any public that may be watching, Chair, you referred to some documents that were being released, although partly redacted. They have been published as a supplementary pack, so are available either via the internet, our webpage for the meeting, via the intranet pages for those internal, or via the Modern Gov app. So they are available to open up and access. Chairman, you've actually covered some of the points I was going to raise, but if I can just give a very quick summary of where we are and how we've got to this point, and I'm sure you wish to progress with the meeting. So Cabinet made its decision on the 9th of March in relation to the Homeless Health Hub. The decision was published on the 10th of March. Members will be aware that any decision of the Executive which is not subject to urgency provisions shall not come into force and may not be implemented until the expiry of 5 clear working days after the decision was published, pending call-in. The call-in period commenced on the 10th of March and closed on the 17th of March. A valid call-in request must have the correct number of signatures, which it did on this occasion, and it must give reasons for the call-in. The reasons must set out the grounds upon which the call-in is based and include evidence to support those grounds. The Constitution requires the reasons for a call-in to be at least one of the following. A, the decision was not made in accordance with the principles of decision-making as set out in Article 12 of the Constitution. B, the decision was not published in accordance with the requirements for the Cabinet Forward Plan provisions. Or C, the decision was not in accordance with key policy framework or budget. The reasons provided on this occasion all relate to A, claiming that the decision was not made in accordance with the principles of decision-making as set out in Article 12. Principles of Article 12 are set out in the report in paragraph 7 in full, and the 4 specific principles referred to in this submitted call-in are set out in paragraphs 9 to 12 of the report. These should form the basis of the board's focus in considering the call-in this evening. The Constitution further prescribes the call-in procedure following your meeting. It is for the board to consider the matter and decide whether to offer any advice to Cabinet in relation to the reasons specified in the call-in submission. If the board decides to offer any advice to Cabinet, then the decision may, if the board decides not to offer any advice to Cabinet, then the decision may be implemented immediately. If advice is offered, the Cabinet will be required to reconsider the decision in light of the advice of the board. Where advice is offered by the board, its advice will be submitted to the Cabinet for a decision to be made on the matter. The Cabinet shall consider the advice but shall not be bound to accept it or in whole or in part. Cabinet shall have sole discretion to decide on any further action to be taken in relation to the decision. Regardless of the Cabinet's subsequent decision, there are no further rights to enable a councillor to submit a call-in notice. The decision may then be implemented. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard. Now, before I ask Councillor Slade to introduce the reasons for the call-in, I'd just like to welcome a few people here attending this evening. Got quite a few people, a few officers here. First of all, we've got Leader of the Council, Councillor Drew Mellon. Good evening, Drew. Councillor Karen Rampton, Portfolio Holder for People and Homes. Councillor Hazel Allen, Lead Member for Homelessness. Graham Farrand, Corporate Property Officer. We've got Jess Gibbons, Chief Operations Officer. Lorraine Mealings, Director of Housing. Ben Tomlins, Head of Housing Options and Partnerships. Sam Munnings, Estates Manager. And William Jones, Senior Estates. Sorry. Welcome to our team this evening. What I'm going to do is to invite Councillor Slade to introduce the reasons why the call-in is going, and then following that, the other members who were party to the call-in would be given the option to speak if they wish. We will then ask the Leader of the Council and Portfolio Holder for Finance and Transformation, Councillor Drew Miller, to then respond to that. And then following that, we will have, we'll open it up for debate from members. Okay, so that's the process. So, Councillor Slade, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So following the decision of Cabinet, we were clearly concerned that the advice given unanimously by Overview and Scrutiny Board doesn't appear to have really even been considered. So we looked at the options around call-in, and a number of reasons were given. So just going through them in turn, and I'm assuming we'll then be able to discuss them, each of them. The first one was relating to Article 12.1.1d, which is consulting properly and taking professional advice from officers. On this occasion, we were really clear that the paper that was going to Cabinet had 4 options, none of which were recommended by officers. There was no information produced to suggest that the council had consulted with partners or received confirmation of support from one or more of those partners. There was no evidence to suggest that funding was available to support the partnership. There was a suggestion that someone might be interested, but absolutely no business case that supported that. It was also clear, not only from the paper presented to Overview and Scrutiny Board, but from the officer commentary at the Overview and Scrutiny Board, that the advice of the officers was that it would not be good value for money to proceed with what was at the time option 4, which was to go ahead. So that was the first reason for calling. The second reason for calling related to Article 12.1.1f, which is ensuring that the action is proportionate to what the council wanted to happen. And in this particular case, the decision to spend almost £1 million on a hub without establishing the number of people that will be supported by it meant that it isn't possible to establish whether the investment is proportionate. We were told on numerous occasions that this was designed for rough sleepers and not for the wider group of residents who were at immediate risk of homelessness, and therefore, based on the very low numbers of rough sleeping, street homeless, around the 30, to spend £1 million on a facility when they already have access to the incredible services provided by the health hub, the health bus, Maggie Kirk and her homeless outreach, Roots to Roots, Genesis Centre in Poole, and other primary care services, there was no evidence this was proportionate. So the further issue there is that the council's stated aim in the homelessness reduction strategy is to reduce homelessness and rough sleeping to as close to zero as possible. And if that is done, the hub would become redundant very, very quickly, and become an asset that the council would be stuck with without having a really good use for. So that was the reason for that. Article 12.1.1h explained what options were considered and give the reasons for the decision. The reason that we put this forward was that whilst the paper explained what options were considered, it didn't actually give reasons for the decision. It was also clear that there was no preferred option, that 4 options were being considered. When the lead member introduced the paper to the board, they stated clearly it was the preferred option was option 4, which completely contradicted the paper. It's going on to the fact that the ultimate decision of Cabinet wasn't even option 4. So the decision made by Cabinet not only was not one of the options considered, it not only was not the option that was clearly not good value, but it was another decision altogether. So there's no evidence that the other options were properly considered. And then Article 12 1.1i is that the decision be made in public unless there are good reasons for it not to be. There is an acceptance that the purchase price of the homeless hub is commercially sensitive, and there are a very small number of redacted items. But the reason the decision had come to Cabinet in the first place was that the original proposal had grossly underestimated the works required, had not considered the need to receive a market value for a property under the Charity Commission rules, which I would have thought is a basic fundamental of property purchasing. So therefore a potential failure of property services, legal, finance, and not discussing that in public denied the public the right to understand that the council had utterly failed in this to project plan something and come up with even somewhere close to the original budget. So, the belief there is that all of that should have been in the public domain, and only the actual numbers concerned should have been exempt. So to make the whole paper exempt, I think does not serve the public well and goes against the rules of transparency. So they were the reasons that we gave for the call in. They were all found to be valid, and I hope that we can come up with a sensible recommendation that takes us back to where we started from, which is around the fact that this is not good value for money. This is not serving the purpose. We don't know whether the rough sleeping population has been consulted about whether they would use this facility when they have other facilities that meet their needs. And therefore, I would propose eventually that we go back to our original recommendation and ask for reconsideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So the other members, was it Councillor Rigby? Councillor Rigby, did you wish to add anything to that?
No, not right now. I'm happy with how Councillor Slade's presented that, and I'll go with whatever comes up for debate later on.
Thank you. In that case, I will call upon Leader of the Council. I think is going to respond to this. Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, evening, Chair. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak here. What I thought I'd do, just set a little bit of background. I know you've touched on it, but I think it'd be useful as well. Yeah, I think we're clear, and actually, you've recognised earlier on, Chair, that this principle in front of us was strongly supported by yourselves and other Open Scrutiny colleagues, and we appreciate that. The ambition for us, for this administration, I'm sure for any administration, is to support our homeless and those at risk of homelessness in our community more than we are doing, doing currently. We want to. This is a priority area for us. We've had a lead member since I first became lead member for homelessness since I first became a leader. So from day one of our administration, we put this at the centre of what we want to achieve. I'll also just talk a little bit about, Chair, about how we've gotten to this concept of a health hub, and it is through that active partnership working, multidisciplinary, multi-organisation has led to this health hub concept. Effectively, we've played our key part in that as health. As housing, health are involved in that. A lot of the voluntary sectors and community is involved in that as well. So this concept has come entirely from working with people who work with this cohort regularly and are passionate about moving it forward. Just to sort of finish that summary in terms of background, I mentioned that Hazel has been the lead member on this since we became administration. I was working closely with Hazel and at the time Bob on this from 18 months, and Karen Ramsden is now the portfolio holder for housing, is also involved in this more recently. So we had originally taken, Cabinet had originally taken the decision to proceed. Then we had, our partners, the church in this transaction had to do a external round of to effectively to sell it. That meant the price rose slightly, and at that point we'd also had further due diligence work that we would have intended to do post the original paper, which suggested that if we were to develop it as it was planned in terms of being a council-led acquisition and refurbishment and running, there were some credible concerns around value for money and how expensive that might well be. So what we wanted to do as a cabinet and as a group of portfolio holders and lead members was to consider a way forward. And we wanted to proceed if we could find a route forward. So we were aware we weren't going to be able to proceed on the original decision. So it was right to take a paper back through the full overview and scrutiny and cabinet process to consider the options. And if we could find an option that was acceptable with a political ambition and through that process to then make that formal decision to proceed. We felt, and I feel, that it's right to present the clear options in this case without any recommendation, because effectively, we were respecting the process to go through the process to have that discussion through overview and scrutiny and through cabinet to get to a preferred outcome, which we did. And I'll come on our close, Chair, talking about how I believe absolutely we've listened to the recommendations from overview and scrutiny, but I'll do that shortly. So the concerns were over, value for money, particularly in the in-house option. I think that was quite clear in the paper as one of the options. Overview and scrutiny were very clear too that there were concerns over value for money, and particularly in that option. So what's actually happened? We should, what decision has been taken, and I've explained some of the process behind it. But the outcome was absolutely to listen to overview and scrutiny, and to generate a new recommendation to seek partners and to cap costs, and deliver in the most efficient way that we could do that. So the recommendation and the decision arrived at does exactly, it does exactly that. What in terms of the overview and scrutiny recommendation was in two parts, wasn't it? It was to reconsider the purchase. We have reconsidered it. We've changed the recommendation, not the recommendation, changed the option, and we set cap at £800,000. When we agreed that it was too expensive to deliver in-house. And then the other part of the overview and scrutiny recommendation was to do more work around the partnership working, what is needed. Well, absolutely. So the next stage, and you'll see in the decision, is to ask partners to bid to run this, and also then to defer the decision. So if we are not satisfied that the partners aren't in the right place to run this, the chief operations officer and the portfolio holder need to be assured of that before we can move forward. So absolutely, have we reconsidered the purchase? Yes. Have we looked at the work around partnership working and what is needed? Absolutely, yes, we have. So just going into effectively the four parts of the call-in, the first part about, has advice been taken? Well, I think quite clearly it has. We saw the advice and all the options in the paper before overview and scrutiny. It came before cabinet. We're very clear on that, and we're also clear that some of those options were not positively received, options, and we've changed and we've come up with a recommendation that was, after taking advice of the overview and scrutiny committee and the cabinet debate that did that. So it's quite clear that the advice was tabled and advice was taken. The second part was, is it proportionate? Well, at £800,000, I think it needs to be said, one, that this is an absolute priority area for us. It's a priority area for our town centres. It's a priority for us to have much more ambition for our homeless community and those at risk of homelessness, as it is a priority of our partners. But it's also a priority for us to support our pride agenda, support our investment in town centre agenda. So £800,000, and I'll remind people, we've had a link to £800,000 and 30 people, but this is a permanent asset. So this will mean this is an asset which our communities will benefit from permanently. So I feel this is clearly proportionate for where we've gotten to at £800,000 cap. It would be clearly proportionate to the issues we have in front of us now. But on top of that, this is a permanent asset we will keep and will continue to be delivering for our communities. So, the whole process in this has come through partnership working. So again, this is a proportionate response that ourselves and our partners have tabled to a problem that has been affecting our communities and vulnerable people in our communities for some time. Chair, the third call in was around, have options been considered and reasons given? Well, the options were explained really clearly in the paper. we can prove that, you know, as a matter of fact, that we, you know, the debate has been listened to in overview and scrutiny, and we discussed effectively that when we said, well, we were pleased to come up with the new recommendation, the tweaked recommendation, and Chair, that was done through an amendment, you know, effectively. So it's not strange for members of this council or any council to have recommendations before it, have options before it, and then to say, well, actually, we've listened to the debate and we will amend it. That's absolutely normal, and it's actually, you know, really, really good practice. In terms of, you know, how much there should be in the public domain, completely agree. And I stated quite clearly at Cabinet that I wanted to keep as much of that debate in the public domain as possible. And I believe, you know, I nearly got to the point of getting all of that discussion in public. But we had to then discuss the, you know, your overview and scrutiny recommendation, and where the advice I was given there, Chair, was where the overview and scrutiny recommendation had been given in private session. I wasn't able to talk about it in public session. But there is a point around whether the paper, more of a paper, should have been in the public domain, and I think, you know, that's potentially a valid point. You know, the advice we were given in terms of how best to structure that paper was advice after discussing it with the monitoring officer and the chief executive. But it is a, you know, we've gotten to the outcome, and we've conducted enough of our cabinet debate, at least in open. So I'll just repeat, Chair, you know, we have a strong ambition to do this. I think everybody's agreed on that. That's great. We've come up with a solution that does cap the costs at £800,000 and will deliver for us if we can engage our partners to come along with us, and that is at the delegation of our Chief Operations Officer and portfolio holder. And we can clearly demonstrate it's not our obligation to listen to the recommendations of Overview and Scrutiny Committee, but we can clearly say in this instance we have, you know, reconsidered a purchase, and we have reconsidered and come up with a solution that involves, you know, more detailed partnership working, and we have deferred the decision to see if our portfolio holder and Chief Operations Officer can be satisfied of that. I genuinely don't see what more we could have done in terms of respecting overview and scrutiny. We put a paper together that said it wanted to listen to the debate. We've listened to the debate. We've evidenced that we've changed the recommendation for it, and we've capped the costs and rejected some of the options that we were, and we've come up with an option, if it can be delivered, that is significantly more efficient. So, Chair, I'm very proud of the work that Councillor Allen is doing for this council in terms of leading us through this. I'm very proud of the amount of you know, commitment Cabinet have shown to these vulnerable people in this area of our community. I'm very proud of the significant and detailed partnership work that you know, this is bringing together, and I'm very proud ultimately of the process and the decision in that which we've taken, Chair. So very happy to obviously take questions. We are supported by Jess Gibbons and I think Lorraine's here as well, so and Karen and Hazel, so portfolio holder and lead member. Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Allen, you wanted to come in? Thank you.
Yeah, so it's just a couple of extra points that I'd like to clarify, if you don't mind, Chair. Thank you. So I just wanted to make a point around the second reason for calling, and the statement that said that this hub wasn't for people that were street homeless, and I'm really not sure where that's come from, because that's really not at all correct. Obviously, as Councillor Mell has already said, everyone's been in agreement of the principle of this front door hub, but it's always planned and was always right from the inception of the idea, a multi-agency approach, including health, housing. The heart of it is health, but it's the aim of this service is to meet all the needs of the people that we are trying to serve, the ones with the most complex need, the most vulnerable in our society. And this will be serving anyone that comes under the banner of homelessness, anyone that doesn't have a secure tenancy, whether they are currently street homeless or whether they are in any form of temporary accommodation. Obviously, we want to aid people to access mainstream services, but we know that clients with very complex need that are vulnerable and often are in quite a large amount of chaos in their lives do not access mainstream services, and that's where this hub comes in. It picks up on that lack of engagement wraps around people. It tries to deal with all the issues that are facing them at the same time, and it is hard to completely establish how many people that will be, but I would think it's probably going to be about 30 to 50 people under that multi-agency approach at any one time. These are clients, these are residents that are costing the local authority and the NHS a lot of money. They estimate 14 to 21,000 pounds per person per year. I think that's an underestimation. And we will try and move people onto mainstream services, but we want this hub to also be there to catch people if they stop accessing services and they start to move back into that chaos, to stop them losing their accommodation. So it's not just about helping people off the streets, but it's also about preventing them falling again. And that's where this hub fulfills that need. And you know, that's why it's really important. It's not just for people that are housed, it's not just for people that are street homeless, it's for anybody that comes under the homelessness banner. And I don't quite understand why that hasn't been clear from the start, because it's certainly been clear from all the agencies that have worked around this. This is a community partnership approach, and we're talking about a cost-effective way of delivering this. But this allows the community to get right behind this project, which it has been, but it really allows them to get behind it. And I think the one thing that's worked really well over the last couple of years is everybody working in partnership to try and reduce homelessness. And yes, we would like to get to a point where we have nobody homeless, and the government ambition is that the episode of homelessness is rare, brief and non-recurring. So I do agree this hub service will evolve, but there'll always be the need to prevent homelessness, and there'll always be the need to catch people when they fall, so that we can have a very brief episode of homelessness. So I do think that it's really important that we understand that this might be a small number, but they are a very complex people that do need that overall multi-agency, multi-care approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I don't think, I think it's understood that in principle this board did support the objectives of the Health Hub. So its first scrutiny of the initial report and a subsequent report. The issue seemed to be around the costs and the acquisition of St Stephen's Hall and the ongoing costs maybe, and also the value for money aspect for it as well, because we're talking considerable amounts of money here. Anyway, I'm sure we'll be coming back to that. So, Councillor Dedman, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I did have a question, which is, as you said, about the value for money and the proportionality of the proposed purchase. And that is that the leader very rightly says that he's set a cap on the cost of this asset at 800,000. But my question is, what do you do when you get to 800,000? For example, if you've still got work to do, do you say, right, we're stopping the work? I really would like to know the mechanics of it, leader, in terms of 800,000 and stop, or 800,000 have to come back because there's, more to be done. So it's that really that I'm very concerned about at the present.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dedman. Is that one for you, leader?
Yeah, but very, very happy to chair. Thank you. It's a sound question. So effectively, what we've just be clear about what we've decision we're asking we asked Cabinet to take, and Cabinet ultimately did take, is to say we would go out to partner agencies and say, in a cap of £800,000 in terms of a council's investment, what are you able to deliver the Health Hub concept from that. So now the time is to see what partner agencies come back and say in that financial framework. So we plan to go and do that. It's also worth mentioning in the framework we've come up with, which is something like if it was a charity or a CIC or a partner agency outside of a council, it gives them much more freedom and flexibility in terms of leveraging grant funding. And also leveraging money from charities. We had an initial conversation with a local charity who said they would absolutely be delighted to support the Health Hub concept, but they're unable to support it if it was a council project, and this happens regularly. So a few things. One, we are asking, can people deliver this at that £800,000? And we believe they will be able to, because, and also at certain points in the project, various, companies have asked, for their CSR projects, pro bono work to go into this, which is more difficult for us to do under our procurement regulations. So we've come up with an efficient way of delivering it and setting an 800k cap. And it will be for the partner agencies to say what they how they wish to proceed on that basis. We will only proceed if we have given confidence and clarity that they'll be able to do that, and and they will have a much more access to other funding than we will through this mechanism as well.
Mr. Devlin, you okay?
Well, I sort of grasp the principle, which I better read out because otherwise I might have grasped it totally wrong. I'm terribly sorry, Leader, but I found you were going quite fast. So what we're saying is that it is proportionate then, because although we are saying we will set our cap at 800,000, we're hoping for other partners to step in. Was that the gist? I'm sorry, Drew. Have I actually got that right?
Yes, Leader.
Not quite, but and apologies. Let me go through that again. So effectively, we believe this can, and the advice we've had believes that this can be delivered for £800,000. We are now going to test that with the partnership community. We will only proceed if we are comfortable it can be delivered in that cap. There's a separate point I am making, which is worth making, and it is separate to the point around the 800,000. A charity or a community interest companies, that type of structure would have the ability, but we don't have, one, to accept pro bono, donations and work, and to leverage grant funding and to leverage charity donations as well. So and we'll also be operating on a different procurement framework, which will mean even the refurbishment cost will be potentially less expensive than if we undertook it ourselves. So 2 points, Leslie. One, we believe in the 800k cap. We will not proceed unless we can be convinced of that. Separate point, this is a very efficient way of funding this and operating this going forward, and that should definitely make it work more strongly long term. And actually, might mean it would come in considerably under the 800k cap if we can leverage other funds from other parties.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to get some clarification of this. The recommendation made by Cabinet does not authorise the transfer of the asset either as ownership or under a lease arrangement to a third party. And I think if you could provide some clarification on that, because at the moment it appears that you appoint an operator and provide that you think that they've got the capability to run it, the council retains ownership, and of course with that goes the risk, etc., of owning a building like that. So I just to so what's it actually involved in that, because the original principle of the Health Hub was to provide drug and alcohol services, mental health, blood-borne virus, primary care, hospital-based services, health bus services, podiatry and dentistry. All of this was to be contained within the Health Hub. Now, from the figures that we've seen, it would seem that the limit cap that has been applied to the acquisition is just enough to cover the acquisition and the basic refurbishment of the building. So are you saying that a third party can come in with a fairly big budget and then put in place the capability and facilities to accommodate all of these services, which I understand also includes showers, a laundry, locker rooms, offices, clinic, and that's addition to the basic refurbishment. And let's not forget the risks associated with the retaining wall, which we still haven't had an answer to, about the potential risk and cost involved in that. So, but maybe you could just provide clarification what the intent is in terms of transfer under ownership or lease. So that's probably the starting point for that question. Thank you.
Yeah, if I kick off and anybody might want to come in to add some further detail to it. So Chair, just to be really clear, the £800,000 would be to purchase a building at the price negotiated, and then to invest the remainder or have available to invest the remainder into refurbishment of the building. So that's clearly what that's doing. It's putting the building in a state, acquiring it and putting it in a state where it can be used by whatever partnership agency or group of multidisciplinary teams that want to take that service forward, which we would be a partner of through our housing team, taking involvement in that space. So in terms of the services you're discussing, we have discussed with and have been discussed for a number of years with various different partner agencies. Those people that want to then be, if we could create a building, if you build it, they will come. That's effectively what they've said. So they will come and deliver these services, their services, which they will be funding on a revenue basis, but they'll be funding it through a building that we have provided. So 800K is for purely the purchase and the refurbishment. The multidisciplinary teams will be providing the services. And if we can't get comfort of that, Chair, so if your cynicism, understandable cynicism about that is correct, then we won't proceed. So if we do not get comfort that this building can be delivered for 800K into a building that can house these services, we will not proceed.
Okay, that's very clear. So there is no intention the council will acquire the building and it will retain ownership along with the risks associated with ownership of the building.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's. I mean, I know Jess Gibbons is coming in, but let's see what comes back in terms of the partners. Any lease arrangement, if there was a lease arrangement from this, can discuss where the risk lies in terms of the maintenance of a building, etc. So, is it a fully repairing lease? Is it not, etc. So, I think, Chair, that's a bit early for that. But what we can say is we will own, the building. We will have the ability to direct that, and we will not proceed with the purchase or the refurb unless we're convinced about the partnership working that will sit behind it.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Councillor Allison.
Could I just say, Jess Gibbons is looking to come in, Chair.
Sorry.
He might have been on that point. Has a hand up, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
No problem, Chair.
Yes,
it was just to clarify, yes, the decision would be made in terms of whether it was a license or a lease, a long-term lease, depending on the tender returns we get through, in order to negotiate with that appointed organisation as we go forward. Just to clarify that. In terms of you mentioned the retaining wall, and in terms of that retaining wall, it is actually our land behind it already, so we already have that risk as a council in terms of the retaining wall risk. That's been confirmed.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I actually missed out Councillor Earl, who was first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate firstly that I think you're right. We do all agree in principle with this. I think it's more just about looking at whether we can justify that cost with what we're trying to achieve, and whether there are better things that money could be spent on if this just isn't viable. So, but first I just wanted to ask about timescale. So when we started this in May last year, as a board, we discussed it. We were a little bit uneasy about all this cost falling onto the council, and that was one of the things I remember raising it, that this should already have been discussed with partners, and we should be looking at a partnership to proceed then. We're getting on for a year later, and we hear a lot about this partnership working, and we hear a lot about discussion around it, but none of that was in the paper, none of that was described to us at the first time we scrutinised this, or the latest time we scrutinised it, or now. So I wanted to get some clarification on exactly what we're talking about in terms of partnership working, what work has been done, because we're now at sort of this pinch point where we've got to make this decision, but we still don't have that sign up by partners either around the vision or around the finances to make it a reality yet. And the other thing I wanted to say about timescales is, of course, where we are now, grant funding takes time to obtain, particularly if you've got to sell something, a vision which is quite large, in what we want to do with this. But really, shouldn't we be obtaining funding in the first instance, then securing buy-in from partners, and then finding a suitable premises? And I just wanted to ask, when does this decision need to be made by, and what will we expect to see from partners who are willing to buy in? Thanks.
Thank you. Leader?
Yeah, thank you, Millie. I think there's been questions, and we've had questions on different things around what's a good use of capital, and whether we should be funding certain things when we've taken other papers through, and I get that. That's a discussion, that's a decision. As a concept I'm really happy, and politically we as an administration we feel very strongly about. It's that asset-based community development where you have things that are really strong in your community, strength-based approach. So where can we unlock them? Where can we make them grow? Where can we make them flourish effectively? So you have a significant number of partner agencies, some NHS, police, effectively, some third sector charities. But there is an absolute willingness. So one point, and I know it wasn't made aggressively, but it's about, do the partners buy into the vision, and sort of questioning that. They absolutely do, and there's been years of work and years of partnership working to deliver. Like Hazel can talk more eloquently about that. But we've got this community ready to go and tackle this problem in a way that we have never tackled it before, in a way that is absolutely ambitious. If we can unlock some capital, unlock a building for them to do it in. So your question, when does the decision need to be taken? Ago, arguably about 5 or 10 years ago, probably. That would have been a good time to take the decision. And it's actually been on us that this hasn't gone forward any quicker, because we've got. Because effectively we need to give clarity to the partnership on whatever way we want to interact with them or whoever they are, and we need to make sure we can buy the building. We've only just got to that position. Partly that's our fault, partly that's to do with the procurement around a charity asset, which meant it had to go through a full process to do that. But we've got committed people ready across that sector willing to do it. We believe that we should use our capital to unlock that, and it will massively benefit us going forward. Have I largely answered your question, Millie, or are there parts of it that I haven't?
Thank you. No, I absolutely agree. I completely agree with pretty much everything you've said. I think the only thing that the big question mark is over is why this building? Why not another building which is more suitable, and which we can buy, in partnership with another partner, rather than the whole cost of acquisition and refurbishment falling to the council.
Yeah. Leader?
Chair, and I'll bring Hazel in behind me if you allow it, Chair. That'd be really helpful. Because people already, the homeless community already use this building. The partners already work out of this building. It is getting sold and it is in a state of disrepair. This is the place. To do the service. We've heard eloquently on a number of different occasions, previous overview and scrutiny in cabinet. We have to provide services to people in this difficult communities where they are ready to receive them. We are not, there's no issue with the amount of services we want to offer this community. The issue is we're not offering them historically in a way in which they can access them. So we do it. Let's do it where they are, which is and where our partners are already working, which is out of this building. This is the building. It's not a case of just, can we lease somewhere? Can we find somewhere on the 3rd floor above a chip shop? This is about, this is where these people are, and this is a building we need to acquire for them if we're ambitious about solving this problem. Chair, I believe Councillor Allen has a hand up. Sorry, and she will talk more eloquently than I will about why that building. But over to you, Chair.
Lorraine Mealings, I see that you've got your hand up as well. Also, I'll come back to you after Hazel Allen has spoken. Thank you.
So It's location, location, location. If you talk to the people that already work out of this building, you talk to the nurses, the doctors, the people that work every day with this client group, they're all 100% in agreement of how crucial and how right St Stephen's is. And it's hard perhaps to get it over, but location, it's quiet, it's private, it reduces stigma. It's in the centre, but it's not in the centre. It's tucked away quietly. It's where people go, where people feel safe already. It's somewhere that they know, if you like. It's somewhere that they trust. It's large enough to offer adequate accommodation to support our partners. Everyone's been behind the concept and the location for 2 to 3 years, and everyone's in agreement that this is the right place for this client group. It's in the centre of our conurbation. It's where we have the greatest need. We have looked for other locations. We've been and visited places. We've looked at property that we have within the council's portfolio. We have genuinely looked, gone away, and then come back, because at the end of the day, St Stephen's genuinely is the right place. I just believe it in my bones, and I know that's not quite a very accurate way of saying why something is, but if you talk to the people on the ground that work with this client group, they all in 100% in agreement that this is the right location for this service. Thank you.
Thank you. Lorraine, did you want to come in?
Hi, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to add a bit more context in response to Councillor Earle's comment about what the partners are doing and the sort of timings issue. So just to add to what's already been said, I guess, the team have been working really hard, as Councillor Allens and Councillor Mellor have described over the last year or so, to really galvanise that multidisciplinary team. So we've got a memorandum of understanding in place, and the partners that we've got signed up to that are the Health Bus. I know they've already been mentioned. We've got the Drug and Alcohol team, Adult Social Care, Mental Health Services, obviously housing, and our primary care GP services, etc. So we've got all the kind of parties around the table, and they're working through establishing new ways of working. So how they're going to jointly case manage individuals, how they're going to share data, all that kind of mechanics behind the scenes. And we're hoping that we could get to a position of formally launching that branded multidisciplinary team around about Easter time. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense. They can operate virtually, but obviously having a building will make them much more productive. So that's why we're keen to kind of conclude this issue as soon as possible. So I hope that adds a bit more helpful context for you. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Allison, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just have some more questions around the finances. I know that there are parts of this document that are redacted, so I'm going to be really careful not to mention any figures. But we've heard from the leader that he's very confident that this project is going to be able to be delivered with £800,000, which is figures already been mentioned. However, the Cabinet report that we've all seen gives a significantly higher cost. The revised document says it's going to cost significantly more than that. I don't understand what's changed since that document and since those costs were revised that makes us now confident that we can deliver the project for £800,000. And the only way it could be made is, as we were talking about earlier, is either with grants or funding from a different organisation, and none of those things are in the paperwork for us to guarantee. So I don't think there's enough due diligence here in terms of the finances to go ahead with this project. There's still a lot more work needs to be done before we can go ahead and support this. Thank you.
Thanks. I would just like to come back to you, Leader, on the point you made about it's not like putting a facility in above a chip shop, because I think what you were probably referring to was the NHS medical centre that has now been provided in Poole above Beales and being lauded as a great example of how quickly an organisation can move effectively, and that appears to be quite a success story. And I know that Councillor Allen at the overview of Scrutiny said, well, it was demeaning for people to be walking through the front door of a retail unit to affect the services or access services, because, you know, I think you'll understand that we take that, you know, because there are more than one door to facilities and retail units. But the point was, of course, that, you know, this is it's going to be a very expensive facility, given the numbers of people that it will be serving. And I have to say, it is a very large building. It will probably accommodate 300 people, not just 30. And when you look at the average size of a GP surgery and facilities, who are serving somewhere in the region of 10,000 people, you then have to ask yourself, you know, about the suitability of this building that incidentally needs a new roof. So it really is about how much it's costing and whether it presents value for money. And if possible, I would like to ask the property officer, council property officer, if he believes that this represents value for money. So if you're there, Mr. Farran, I'd appreciate your view on that.
Thank you, Chairman. Without mentioning any of the numbers, I'm satisfied that if we can deliver it at the total budget that we've talked about, then that represents fair value for money in terms of the building. I think the key challenge from Overview and Scrutiny is, can it be delivered within the budget? And actually, that's what the next step of the process is going to tell us, because we're either going to get organisations, partnerships, picks, whatever, coming forward saying this is what we can do, or we're going to get a whole raft of people saying you must be joking, it's going to cost X, Y, or Z, and therefore we won't proceed. And I think that's what the leader's been saying. But my sense is, with the budget we've set, then that will represent value for money, because the council will get an asset that will be refurbished and providing services. You know, if the budget went up by 50%, I probably wouldn't have the same feeling about it, which is why I think this number is a reasonable number.
Thank you very much. Very clear. Councillor Allison.
Just to come back on that, I mean, I'm a bit bemused really, because the report we've got in front of us has got a much higher figure in it, and I don't understand what has changed. I don't understand how you can say, as long as it comes in under the budget we've set, the budget cap we've set of £800,000, then it's good value for money, when the reports we've got in front of us clearly state that's not how much it's going to cost. You've given us a report which says it's going to cost significantly more than that. So am I missing something?
Yeah, Leader, it's a good question. I'm assuming, Leader, from what you said earlier on, that you would be anticipating that the operator would be accessing its own funds in order to provide the services within the building that's been paid for by the council effectively. Thank you.
Yeah. No, not quite. Let me just thank you, Chair, for bringing me back in. And again, it's worth trying to explain again. I thought I'd put it into my early introduction, and apologies if it wasn't clear enough. I'm convinced that the in-house option, you know, which is the in-house option, is saying under our procurement regulations and the standards we would do work, or you know, and actually the number you've got in front of you is a desk-based square footage valuation. The original survey was considerably less. So we actually have two numbers, one a lesser number and one a higher number. But my point is, if we did it, I think it would be difficult to bring that in under £800,000. Where if a third party did it, you know, does this, then they have a much different access to in terms of how they can go and procure who to do it. That is a less expensive process to go through our full tender process. That you would, and there have been at certain points in this project offers of, you know, corporate social responsibility, you know, donations, effectively the pro bono work, which will come in and they'll be able to access as well. So it is completely different. It's an absolutely valid question. I get it entirely. But they're operating, you know, a charity, a CIC would be operating in a completely different restricted way to us, and would be able to bring this in, you know, more efficiently. And to be really clear again, and this is Graham's point as well, if we're not convinced of that, we won't go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Allison. Did you want to come back?
Yes, please. So that's fantastic. I think I understand now. So the project can be delivered. It can't be delivered by us on our own. It can only be delivered if we get the extra grant funding and we get the partner on board. So therefore, what needs to happen next is this needs to be go back. The officers need to work on this some more. They need to find the partner and get guaranteed funding. We need to find the grants where the money's going to come from. And then they need to bring a report back which actually states how much this project's going to cost. So Overview and Scrutiny can have a look at it properly, and the Cabinet can go ahead and make a decision based on relevant finances. Until then, I don't see how we can approve it.
Thank you, Councillor Alison. Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm very wary of anybody that says somebody can do a job much better than a council can. So I know from my own experience of working with councils, as in another life, that it's very good to work for councils because the regulations make sure that you can do a jolly good job. And if you don't have those regulations, how can you guarantee that, for example, the electricians are doing the right job? However, skimming over that, which perhaps we shouldn't skim over it, I have noted that we will only proceed if we can get this community interest company on board. But this is not the partner that we are talking about with partners, is it? The partners that have been talked about, and I know from my own time as portfolio holder with adult social care and health, they are the NHS partners, all the partners that come along, join the band, all come to the meetings. But when it comes to budget, they have no budget to offer. And I think that we would all agree on that. GPs, no, they've got no money. So they are not the people that are going to be paying for this. The community interest company is going to be paying. And this is the bit that worries me, Chairman. Where is this CIC coming from? We haven't got that far. So the whole thing, again, as I think Councillor Allison is saying, is it's chicken and egg. So we're just going round and round in circles. And I think the circle should perhaps go back to the beginning.
I see Councillor Mellors just had to pop out for a couple of minutes. I don't know, Karen, if you wanted to just comment on that. Councillor Rampton, did you want to comment on that?
I'm here. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I worked in the voluntary sector for many years, and I know that in the voluntary sector you get a lot of bang for your bucks. We all know that, and favours are called in, and partnerships are, alliances are made, and partnerships work really, really well. So I've always been an enthusiastic supporter of involving our voluntary sector where we can. Now, Hazel will be the expert on this, she's the lead member, but services are already being provided by our health colleagues and by us at this location. So it's not as if we're going to suddenly have to procure a whole load of new services. But working with those partners who we hope will come forward and express an interest, I think that we will provide something. It's a bit of a leap of faith, isn't it? It's something quite different for us. We as council quite like to keep control of things, and this is something a little bit different. But I think it will be enormously effective. And Chair, I just wanted to pick up on something you said, if I may, which was about the healthcare centre at Beals. And I just want to point out that that is something completely different. And you've probably been there and had a visit, Chair. And if you haven't, then you really should go there. It's fabulous. But that has clinical areas for tests and screening, and that's to deal with the NHS waiting lists. This is something very different. You would probably not get the same cohort of people going into the town centre, into a shopping centre and accessing those services. As Councillor Allen pointed out earlier, the location we're discussing is discreet, it is private, it's somewhere they know that they're used to, and they feel safe attending there. So please, let's not think, oh, well, we could just set up something in a shop in Winton High Street or something, or they could just go to that place that's already there, because that isn't going to work at all, I'm afraid. As I say, Hazel will have more information on services that are already provided from the location if you want to bring her in. But I did think that, did you have your hand up, Jess? Sorry.
Jess Gibbons wanted to come in. Yes, thank you.
I did have actually, Karen, you said what I was going to say, so I will pass on. Thank you.
I'd just like to come back on one point, if I may. In the original paper, it talked about the hub effectively running as a trial. That's what it said. To see if maybe other hubs similar to this might be positioned across the conurbation. So even at that point, whilst the principle was understood, there's a question about its longevity. And that also makes me nervous about the acquisition of a building like this to provide the services when actually, will it actually work, and will it be effective? And, it's a bit late once you've bought a building, and you're left with something that you've then got to look after. There are risks associated with going ahead, isn't there, at this stage? Would you not think it appropriate to go the other way around, to find some way of providing the services on a temporary basis, and then, see how that goes, and then make that kind of investment into a permanent facility? This is going the other way round.
Chair, may I just come back in for 2 minutes, please? Which is just like to say that our commitment is to have 0 people rough sleeping and homeless. And wouldn't it be fantastic if we did have the centre and then it was redundant within a year because we didn't have anybody who was in need of it? It's not really very likely to happen, is it? We talked about the numbers and about the cohort of people. Let's not just look at the street count, which is about 29 people. There are far more people than that who are living, who are technically homeless, who are sofa surfing, who are sleeping in a car. There are far more people out there than the people that we pick up on the street count, despite the best endeavours of us and our partners when we go out and do those street counts. So there is a population of people that we're probably not even aware of, some of them. And you are never, well, I'm saying never, the ambition is to reduce that number to as near to 0 as we can. But it's not something, as Hazel said earlier, these are people with chaotic, complex lifestyles who can take absolutely months, years to decide that they're ready to accept services and to access permanent housing. And that is the point of having this hub, which, although it provides services at the moment, to wrap around even more services and have everything to hand to enable people to change their lifestyles for good. And to provide a safe base for them to come back to if they're struggling with that concept, because they do, many of them do. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Councillor Rampton. Okay, Councillor Slade.
Thank you. Sorry, do you want to go to Hazel?
I beg your pardon, Councillor Allen, you wanted to come back again?
Yes, just a couple of points, just picking up on what Karen was saying, and just pick up on your point about trial. I think we've sort of gone beyond that now, because we've been working very closely with partners, and we've already have developed that multidisciplinary, multi-agency approach. That's all been going on in the background during this process, and services are delivered out of this location very successfully, and there's evidence from the health bus and their partners that this does work, and it's a very good option. And there are lots of examples of similar provisions around the country that show that actually, if you can offer a bespoke service to this client group, this patient group, then you do get some really excellent wins with them. And then just going back to sort of who the partners are. So in a way, we're talking about sort of 2 groups of partners. We're talking about the health, housing, social care, hospital-based services, primary care, that are already starting to come together as a multi-agency, multidisciplinary team, and are ready to expand the service that is already offered at St Stephen's, but in obviously a much nicer provision, not a church hall that's getting old, but a very nice hub, and they're ready. If we open the door, they would be walking in tomorrow, and they would be putting on clinics. They're all signed up to them, and they would be there tomorrow. So their partners, those partners, the health partners, are ready to come. There are GP provisions that are based somewhere else. They've already said yes, we'll provide those GP sessions that are already paid for at the hub. So those partners are ready. As soon as we open the door, they will be in there, and they're frustrated as we are that hasn't happened yet. Then you're talking about the wider community partnerships, which is voluntary sector, local business, the church, that want to get this building, get it renovated and get it open. And now that's genuine offers, and lots of pro bono offers, and lots of real. I'm surprised they're still with us after this long period, because I would have given up and gone home if it had been me, but they really want to get behind this. So we've got, in a way, it's two lots of partners. There's the health partners, they'll come in and deliver the services, and then there's the community partners that want to deliver this, and they've been with us for 2-3 years, and they're still with us, they're still waiting for us to get our act together and get this building bought and open. And I just pray that we can do that, and that we don't have too many more processes to go through before we start to deliver this amazing service to this vulnerable group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Rigby, thank you.
Thank you. Just coming on to the partners, it's a really simple question. Which are the ones which are going to be able to bring the fund in, who can actually complete this building? Because you've gone through a lot of NHS partners there who are already doing work. And we know the NHS are chronically underfunded. They haven't got the money to bring in and contribute to this building, as I understand it. So which leaves us with the voluntary sector, who may be part of the bigger KIC, CIC, which you're talking about, and will be able to go out and get funding somehow, but they're not getting that funding at the moment. So where do we anticipate this money actually coming from? Can you go into a little bit more detail on it, please? Thank you.
I think that's the next stage, isn't it? That's the whole point. We've decided that this is something that we want to do in partnership. They will then come to us and say, this is who we are. This is the group of people that are putting their names in the hat and saying, we want to operate this and deliver this with you. We can tell you where the grant funding would come from, and we can tell you how we feel that we can deliver this project. And you know, until we say to them, right, you're our partners, they then can't go out and ask for grant funding. So it's like, I can't tell you exactly who everybody is until we decide who the operator is. Otherwise, you know, how can I tell you who the operator will be? That's the whole point of the process that we're now saying that we'd like to move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alison. It just seems strange that, given the, you know, since the project was first initiated, that we don't actually have any idea, well, it doesn't appear that we have any idea of who those partners might be, but and whether they've got the capability of actually doing what it is we're going to be asking them to do. But anyway, moving on, Councillor Alison again, please.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like I'm living in a sort of twilight zone here, because it just doesn't make sense to me. We've had the portfolio holder say, here's the detail on the partners, and then spend 5 minutes not naming any partners. Either we've got one option, which is the partners are all on board, we know who they are, and we know how much money they can give, in which case that should be in the report, or the partnership is the next step. Which one is it?
Well, I think the recommendation of Cabinet does make it clear, doesn't it, that, you know, they're going to seek an operator, and presumably part of that process will be to see if they can actually deliver. And then after that, the hall is then acquired after that process has gone through. So I think the protection is there. You know, if the council does what it says it's going to do in that recommendation, there's protection there. But I'm hoping that we'll come back to in a further report at some stage to see exactly what the real costs are, because we haven't probed that yet, because the question on the cost was something that was left very open-ended before, and we were hoping to get some definitive sort of numbers from the estates team, who at the time couldn't give us a definitive statement at our last meeting. There were some open-ended sort of questions on that, and you know, are there sort of things lurking there that we're not aware of that could actually scupper the whole thing? I don't know. But anyway, before we do that, I'd like to, I think it's Councillor Slade now, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks. I've got a number of questions. My first one is, why on earth is it the council that's doing this? Why is this not being led by the health people? I'm looking at various other organisations, and the community interest company in Brighton isn't actually partnered with the council at all. It's partnered with about 5 other people, but not council. A couple of things I'm really worried about. Firstly, elephant in the room, if we've got this great partnership, why hasn't it been progressed during the last year? There's no need for a building, because if you read the original paper, it's quite clear that the multidisciplinary team can be implemented with an additional building base provided at a later stage. What worries me most is the desperation for this building. So I'd like to ask whether that money has changed hands already. What commitment has been made to this church? Why are we so desperate for this church? It actually states in paragraph 26 of last year's paper, if the building-based provision is determined at a later date, the current building opportunity is likely to be lost. We'll get something else then that isn't going to cost us significantly more than the original budget and a significant proportion of the new budget, which leaves nowhere near enough for the works. Without going into the numbers, the amount that you are leaving yourself to do the work is a fraction of the amount that our team has worked out. Now, I've worked in the voluntary sector. I was a capital fundraising manager for a charity. And yes, certain banks and organisations will come along with their paintbrushes and they'll throw paint around for a while and they'll dig up your garden and they might give you some free materials. But you still have to do a job properly, and you still have to do properly quality assurance, and your projects still cost hundreds of thousands and millions of pounds. You get a bit for free, but you don't get everything for free. And the numbers that are being talked about here are laughable. And as somebody who has done this job in the voluntary sector, to think that a charity is suddenly going to do this refurb for what is around, well, I can't give you the exact numbers, but you know, certainly a third to a half of the cost is really not reasonable. The next thing I've got a major issue with is the chief executive just said if the budget went up 50%, he'd be very uncomfortable. Well, the budget's already gone up 50% from where it was a year ago. So, you know, at what point are we really uncomfortable? The third point I've got is the health bus, which they only bought their bus last year. I've got a copy of their accounts here. They actually raised the money to buy a brand new bus, £64,000 to buy a bus with clinical rooms in it. They've been running this new bus for about 7 or 8 months. The people who have donated for that are suddenly going to find this service undermined because the health bus is sitting on the car park, and we're now going to go, well, it's all right, guys, because we've got this fancy thing now. It says in the frequently asked questions, in theory, a homeless person can walk into a doctor's surgery. Anyone can register with a GP, even without an address. But in reality, when a homeless person goes to a GP practice, they find it difficult. Access to a GP practice can be difficult due to mobility issues. They may not have money for a bus fare or the mobile to call for an appointment. These are all barriers to homeless accessing healthcare. Now, you argue that going to the under the flyover at St Stephen's Church is the solution, but it's still a bus fare if you live in Boscombe. It's still a bus fare if you live in Poole or Christchurch or Winton or Charminster, when there is a health bus, which is actually already the amazing Maggie Kirk, who we'll keep mentioning because she's an absolute hero. Her and her team are already doing this stuff in the community. They're already providing the service. Now, if they're going to move their service into this building, who's going to run the health bus? Because either the health bus is needed or the health bus isn't needed. And if the health bus is needed, and let's say we don't have 29 people, we've got 50 people, because if you're sofa surfing, the suggestion here is that it's because people might look or smell not so clean and be intimidated and humiliated sitting in a waiting room. Well, people who are sofa surfing or living with friends, generally they probably are registered with a GP. And so we are genuinely talking about 20, 30, 40, 50 people, not 500, 600, 700 people. And if you are talking about 500, 600, 700 people, and you're a mother with 2 small children who is at risk of homelessness, are you going to choose to go to this place, or would you not rather take your children to a traditional GP facility. So I just think there's such mixed messages here. I'm intrigued that there are no other buildings, and I'd like to ask a straightforward question. Has the council approached the commercial estate agents in Bournemouth and actually asked them? Because I have, and I've been told that the council has not approached them to find out whether there are other suitable facilities. It feels like you're so desperate for this building, you're not actually seeing whether there are other suitable facilities. I don't know why we have to buy it. Why can't the church actually provide a lease? The church own the building. The church is apparently already a partner. They're really keen. Well, why don't they actually set up the community interest company? And why don't we become a partner with the church? Because we already grant fund the health bus and other facilities. Why don't we join their partnership rather than us having to own it? There's a bit of an obsession with this council owning everything, and it just feels rather strange. And what is the plan for the building in the long term? Because it's right next door to a great development plot that we've just built on. And if in the long term we are going to end up with fewer homeless people and a more wraparound service, bearing in mind that this council is under serious financial constraints and is supposed to be shrinking its asset base, although that doesn't seem to be happening, maybe the plan is actually to develop this building for flats in the long term, because that would be my instinct if I was a member of the public, wondering why there's such a desperation to get this property. So to me, it just feels like it's back to front, get the partnership in place first, get a memorandum of understanding, present that and say, we want to run this. And once you've got that, go out and look for a building. But why this obsession with this building is completely beyond me and completely beyond anyone that's listening, I'm sure.
Councillor Ramsden, would you like to respond to that, please?
I'm not quite sure where to start, Chair. I mean, all I can say is that if ONS strongly supported the principle of Health Hub, a lot of what I'm hearing tonight doesn't actually seem to be in tune with a strong support for this facility. And we keep saying the same things, don't we? I think Councillor Allen has eloquently expressed the reason why this building is the right building in the right place. That's why there's an MOU already. That's why partners are saying that they're very happy to work from this location. That's why they're saying that it's the right one for people who are chaotic and complex and homeless or at risk of homelessness. That is why they're coming there. And we've been through this conversation several times that the next step is to find a partner who can do it within that financial envelope. And if we don't find a partner that can do that, back to the drawing board, isn't it? But that's the plan. That's the next step. So I'm a bit puzzled by some of the repeated questions. And perhaps Councillor Allen can elaborate again on the reasons why this is the right location. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we understand. Thank you, Councillor Ramsden. But the bottom line, as I outlined at the beginning of the meeting, it was much more to do with the finances associated with the programme and not the principle of the Health Hub itself. And I go back to the report presented to Cabinet, which actually said the increased budget may be seen disproportionate to the size of the client group. And that's a pretty fundamental warning from officers who'd written the report, because we have to assume that the scale of costs will be in the order given. And in fact, it said that in the report, it wouldn't be significantly different. So what we're saying now is that, the cost will probably be the same of that order, but the council's limiting its expenditure in terms of what its cost will be. But nevertheless, the overall figure will be the same, regardless of who pays for it. Does that then represent value for money, given the numbers of people that will be using the facility? And I know it's very hard to start talking about money when you're talking about people's lives and all the really good things that the Health Hub will undoubtedly do. But, we do have a duty to look at the best way of providing these services. And much of this, and I hope nobody's taking any of this on personally, but, It's our role to test and challenge the assumptions and the plans being made by Cabinet. And I think we do genuinely have real concerns about what we believe is seems to be a kind of a blinkered look at what the other options may have been, and a fixation on getting this sort of, so all the right, and I understand the issues about location, but you've got to balance that against the argument for how much it's actually going to cost. And of course, we will continue to own it. We have the ongoing running costs, for the life of, as long as we retain the building. So, and we still don't really understand what the costs are going to be overall, although we do accept that it's limiting the council's expenditure. But of course, what we're concerned about is whether we'll actually achieve the objectives at all for the project, because it may be that you can't find an operator that's got a pile of money that they can pile into a project like this. And then we say bye-bye and we start to look again at the other options, I guess. Anyway, that's me.
Chair, can I just come back in for 1 minute, please? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Thank you very much. I just want to comment, and I really genuinely don't want to make light of the money that's been suggested, because it is a lot of money. It's public money, and it's a lot of money. But can I just point out that one person, one child, for example, coming into care at the council can cost £250,000. One adult with a disability can cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. So although it is a lot of money, and I really don't mean to say that, oh, it's nothing, it's just a small amount of money. It isn't, it's a lot of money. But if we can get somebody on the right track, get that wraparound support and get their lives less chaotic, less complex, and get them into housing, then it's worth it for one person if it prevents a child going into care, somebody's disability becoming more complex and needing residential care, for example. There are a lot of nuances to this. So I just don't want to be getting too tied up with sum of money. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Okay, Councillor Slade, then I'll have Councillor Farr and then Councillor Earl. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I mean, obviously, we know that there are many cases that are, very difficult, and quite rightly, the council spends a lot of money. And as we will keep repeating, nobody is saying that we don't want to spend money on this very vulnerable group of people. I am pretty disappointed that nobody's even attempted to answer the relationship with Health Bus. So I would be grateful if those questions could be answered, and also the questions around whether other agents have been approached for other properties around the centre of Bournemouth, because I am advised that the answer to the second one is no. And I think it's reasonable to ask that. You've said there is nowhere else. Says who? Actually, what work has actually been done to this, and why is it we've been waiting for a year on a property that's excessive? Because those haven't been answered, and that's what scrutiny is about. It's about asking those questions and getting reasonable answers, and they're not coming back. All that's happening is deflection to make it look like we don't want to support the homeless. At the original budget that was set a year ago, this was already questionable in terms of whether the client group and the costing was the right spend. But we all agreed at that point that at that budget, it was a reasonable thing to do. This new budget is getting on for double. And the budget that it was before you had to retract from the original plan and go with this plan 5 is very different again. So, I think those things do need to be answered.
There were a couple of specific questions in Councillor Slade's statement just now. I've jotted a couple of them down. One of them was, what is the plan for the longer term? There was the issue about the Health Bus being redundant. Has the council approached it? Oh no, you already gave the answer to that, I think. What else was there, Councillor Slade? There's the specific questions you asked. Just so we get answers.
It was whether commercial agents have been approached for other potential buildings, whether any deposit or agreement have been given with the church, and the health bus in terms of the ability for the team to run the health bus at the same time as this, and what would happen to the grant funding that's been going to the health bus?
Okay, I think Councillor Rampton, those probably fall down to you if you're able to.
Chair, if I may, I'm going to bring in Councillor Allen on the health bus. She's far more involved than I am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen.
So the health bus, as everyone knows, is a standalone charity. They are very much part of this whole project and have been right from the beginning. You keep mentioning Dr. Maggie Kirk, but she's one of the people that's been on board with this whole project right from the beginning and is 100% behind it. The health bus has a place because they can offer outreach and a hub and spoke type model, and that's the way that we've always imagined it to be, because obviously the hub is in Bournemouth, but we do need to cover the whole conurbation. So the health bus will definitely not be redundant. It certainly has a place to play in the whole of this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The other one was the commercial. Oh yeah, any agreements with the church? Any deposits or any formal agreements with the church on the acquisition of the St Stephen's Hall?
Chair, I'm not aware of any financial contributions to the church or payments having been made, but I'm sure officers can confirm that. Thank you.
I think there was the other question associated with that was has any lease options been examined? Could we not rent the hall? Why do we need to buy it? Yes, please go ahead, Jess Gibbons, please. Thank you.
Just to confirm, there's been no payment in terms of a deposit to the church. You'll clarify that. And in terms of the lease, the church are looking for a sale, and they have looked at the market. So hence that's the position. The lease hasn't been explored.
Sorry, can I just clarify? We did discuss a lease with them early in this process, and that wasn't something that they wanted to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think the other one was to do with commercial acquisition through other means, and other options that might be available commercially. Is that one? I think Councillor Allen, you did suggest at our last meeting that you had looked at other options. Did you look at commercial, any other commercial options that might be available through I don't know, through estate agents or whoever you would go through? I don't know.
I'm aware that the officers have gone away and looked on a number of occasions for potential other options. I don't have the details of that, but we could probably get that to you. But obviously, we're pursuing the plan as was agreed at Cabinet around the purchase, procurement and development of St Stephen's. So, and that was the most recent decision. Thank you.
Thank you. And did we look at any existing council facilities that may be open? You did. Could you tell us which ones you looked at?
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit commercially sensitive because a couple of those places that we visited were eventually not chosen for a number of reasons, and that a couple of them are actually actively offering other services at the time. So I don't really want to divulge exactly what provisions we did go and visit, but we have looked at a number. And Lorraine, I'd like to bring Lorraine in because she'll probably be able to give you a bit more detail. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lorraine.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Allen. Yeah, we did, without sort of naming some council sites, so we engaged with our estates team, because obviously if we've got any assets within our ownership that we were potentially going to be surplus to requirements, we wanted to look at those, and unfortunately we did draw a blank. As Councillor Allen's described, we had a look at some commercial kind of alternatives, but as we say, the decision that was made in May last year was to acquire St Stephen's Hall, so that was the track we were going down. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Chairman. Having listened to Councillors Allen, Mellor and Rampton and the team of officers this evening, I would suggest that the new homeless hub is a think outside the box project and the help it will provide will be extensive. It's also an ideal location suited for this purpose for those who need access to the services proposed to be provided. So I recommend that we go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. Councillor Earl.
Does Councillor Farr need a seconder for that?
Sorry, did you make a motion then?
I wasn't making an
No, I didn't. I don't think you were. No, no. Okay, Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to jump back too much, but I also wanted to try and get my mind straight on this sort of option 4 that we're taking instead, because it was very clear from the initial paper that, well, in fact, the words was that assessment by officers showed that it would not represent value for money. So where we are now, can I get confirmation from the officers that perhaps this is value for money? And I mean, what I read into that, just to give my own view, is that, you know, if we have this amount of money to give to our officers in homelessness who have worked in that sector for a really long time and said, you know, make the best thing possible you can with that money, or do the best thing, make the most impact that you can, would they come out with this, the health hub, as their number 1 priority? If we truly said to them, here's some money, go and make a difference to our vulnerable people.
I think probably Councillor Allen, is that one for you? I think you're getting pretty close to this.
I can't speak for the officers, but I do know that we have a very clearly agreed strategy, which includes this as a big part of our strategy to end homelessness in BCP. And I would say that if you spoke to a number of partners and a number of officers, and I'm going to put myself into this as well, my feeling when I first became involved in homelessness in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, we have a lot of charities, we have a lot of organisations, we have the council, we have the police, we have so many partners trying to get it to work, to talk to each other, to communicate. That has begun through the Homelessness Reduction Board, that has been developed through an excellent strategy. But the one thing that has held back these services and held back really landing some of this work is that lack of a central hub, excellent one-to-one communication between all the people that are working around these individuals, that they can have really good, strong conversations, share information and get it right. Because what I hear is that these clients are going to so many different places, constantly having to tell their story over and over again, which is traumatic. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. There's 2 or 3 organisations all trying to get a passport at the same time. They're all trying to get them to link in with their drug and alcohol service. It was starting to get to a point where we can actually all work much more closely together. So I would say, and I can't speak for the officers, but I would say that anyone that's working in this area feels very strongly that we need that central point. And it's not just about the individuals coming through the door, it's about all those health workers, social care, working together in one place. And you cannot underestimate that opportunity to walk across the room and say, by the way, how are you getting on with John? Have you seen John this week? Is he engaging with you? And that's what I feel was lacking when I started this work. And I think this is really starting to address it. So I can't speak for the officers, but I feel very strongly that this is a big, important part of our strategy. Let's us all work together much more efficiently. And the more efficient we are, we will then save money. There's some very good modelling that I could share with you, that if you get this right, you save money for the local authorities, you save massive amount of money for the NHS. You reduce the number of people coming into urgent care. It goes on and on and on. You get it right as a system-wide approach and a system-wide model, then you will really start to invest to save. And I think that that's what this project is, invest to save. And it is outside the box. And thank you, Councillor Farr, for saying that. And I think that, so I would say yes. this is what I would spend the money on, but then you know that because I'm the one that wants to do it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Gabriel, please.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies, I wasn't at the earlier meeting, but I found tonight's discussion, very interesting, informative. So thanks to everyone involved. I think my comments aren't going to be a question; it's more of a support for the Cabinet's decision, which I think is reasonable and the right thing to do. So I think I'll just list my reasons why I believe that is the case. It gives the community a chance to work together on homeless issues. The homeless community and support groups are already using the building. The project will be supported by doctors, nurses, along with other agencies. Councillor Allen's comments are powerful and come from a place of knowledge and experience. There are safeguards in place that the project can't proceed without appropriate partners. The council has a positive opportunity to improve the lives and health outcomes of homeless people, and there is no reason why the hub and health bus can't work together. I'm sure they will. If the council doesn't lead on these issues, who does? We are a force for good, and this is an opportunity we can take and move forwards. And complicated problems are costly to resolve, but the work needs to start for long-term savings to the council and society. Again, when I talk in meetings like this, I always try and relate to personal circumstances. I had a friend that sadly passed away last year and was homeless for many years. And it was just, I knew him since I was 9 years old. He's my best friend for many years, and it was just impossible for services to engage with him. His life was chaotic, which came from family issues and relationship breakdowns. But I keep thinking about if he had the opportunity to engage with a hub like this, what difference could that make to his life? Could he still be here now? Could he still be with his mum and dad and still with his kids? And he could have done. And this is where we can chance and be a force for good. So I think we need to move on for it. I think I can understand the reasons for the call-in. I think it's good that we're discussing that so the Cabinet are aware of that. But I think the underlying reason for the decision is the right one. And I think we need to progress a bit as a council and be a force for good, which we all are together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gabriel. Councillor Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, both sort of financially related. One is the overage provision, which is having a little bit of knowledge about overage. It's not a good thing to have to agree to, and it says that if the purchaser obtains planning permission or develops the site, the seller will be entitled to 25% of the resulting uplift in value, and this will be in effect for a period of 25 years. I would hope that we could negotiate that down. We all know what's happened with the old Winterbourne Hotel site that has an overage agreement on it. And if we do reach zero or very close to zero with the Ross sleepers, we will perhaps be looking to do something with this site. And 25 years is quite a long time to have this overage hanging over us. So I would hope that officers would negotiate to try and get that down, if not completely removed. And the other thing is, I only know the outside of this building. I haven't been in it. Am I right in thinking there are flats above it? Yes, there are. Do we know what's going to happen to them? Are we going to take those over and put our own people on the homeless list in there? Are we keeping the rent from that? Do we know what's happening with that? Because that could help with some of the costs of running this building.
Just an admin point. The issue about the overage is actually in the confidential part of the report, so we won't discuss that. But we can discuss the issue about the flat. Thank you. Yes, what's happening to the flat? That's a good question. Councillor Allen?
I don't want to speak about individuals because obviously there are people living in that flat at the moment, but I can reassure colleagues that all necessary steps have been put in place to support them. And then I believe that the flat will be part of the building and will be rented to help support running of the hub. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just like Councillor Gabriel, I wasn't involved when this item came to overview and scrutiny before, and it's been very interesting listening to the debate. So I actually just want to circle back round to the very start of this meeting where, Chairman, you outlined to us what we were here to discuss today, and it was centred around the decision, or rather the recommendation from the Overview and Scrutiny Board to Cabinet, and then the subsequent decision that Cabinet actually took. So I'm looking at the recommendations that the Overview and Scrutiny Board actually took to Cabinet. The first one being to reconsider the purchase of St Stephen's Hall. Now, Councillor Allen has outlined very succinctly, very clearly on several occasions why St Stephen's Hall. Now, I understand the reasons for the call-in. I completely understand the concerns about the value for money issue, and I think that has also been discussed. So I think in terms of addressing recommendation A, that has actually been addressed. And the second recommendation was Council explores partnership work on what is needed before progressing with the proposal. Now, we've heard from both Lorraine Mealings and from Councillor Allen that actually there are partners already in the waiting room who are ready to actually proceed with this. They just want premises to actually be able to operate out of. And I just want to say one other thing, and this relates to value for money. At the very start, when Councillor Allen actually gave us a brief presentation, she did say that it can cost anything from between 14,000 to 21,000 per person to deal with the sometimes very complex issue of someone who is homeless. Now, I know this is only an estimate, but they said the last count there was 29, but we don't know how many others there may be who are at risk of being homeless or who are effectively homeless and sofa surfing. So if we just take the minimum numbers that we are aware of factually, we'll round up to 30 people. At the low end, 14,000 per person. That comes to 420,000. That would be just, and this is a very conservative with a C estimate. So I'm just thinking, actually, value for money, you know, if you compare to, people were talking about the increase in the capital budget, and that is what the recommendation actually says. It says the increase in capital will be capped at 800,000, not that the capital budget will be kept at 800,000. It was very clearly written, the Cabinet decision. So I just think in terms of value for money, that does address that issue, because to say some people are very complex, and as Councillor Rampton has outlined, a looked after child could, and this was probably actually 2 years ago, could cost up to 250,000. So it's just that ripple effect that we have to think of, not just focus on a very narrow point or principle, if you could call it that. I get that we as councillors, we have a duty to make sure that value for money is provided to our council taxpayers. But actually, if you look at this through a bigger lens, through a bigger picture, I think that actually this is probably, on balance, a scheme that's worth pursuing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just a moment. I'll bring you in just a second. This kind of analysis you've done there, I'm not sure how valid that can be. For a start, if you have 30 people that may be homeless, there's no guarantee they'll all be using the facility, maybe only a fraction of them. The other thing is that, you know, we're not comparing lives of adults with those of children. And I understand the point exactly that Councillor Rampton has made. I'm very aware of the huge cost, and the point was well made. If you can save one of those costs by this very good work that will be done in the hub, it could potentially be a cost-saving measure. But you know, that's a complex thing to analyse. And of course, the value for money issue is not one that's necessarily, it's actually more than something we're required as councillors to ensure. There's a statutory obligation on behalf of the council to ensure that all the money it spends does receive value for money. And that's one of the key things, because, and I keep going back to the officers' report, where they said the increased budget may seem disproportionate to the size of the client group. That's a very clear warning that we had in that report. So officers were clearly concerned about that. The other thing, and I want to be able to come back to this if I may, and I'd like to ask, is there somebody from estates here that I could just talk to or put a question to about the potential for costs in excess of those already identified, whether there's any potential for the budget increasing even more than what we believe it's likely to be. So I don't have, is there somebody from estates that can answer that? Lorraine, can you speak on their behalf?
Hi, Chair. Yeah, unfortunately, there's no one from estates on the call. In terms of your question, I think it was, will the costs escalate even further? So I think within the 800k is a fair assumption on the acquisition and related costs like stamp duty, etc. And then, as we have explained, there will be an envelope of that amount that will be put out to tender effectively to seek an operator. So that will be the kind of maximum amount. So there should be no risk over and above that. Hopefully that clarifies your point.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm disappointed there's no link from estates here, because it was a key point that we raised at our last meeting. And I was hoping we would get an update to the costings that were indicative at the time. And the report did say the costings would be finalised at mid-March. But what I'm talking about is the total project cost, not just the exposure to the council. I'm talking about the whole thing, because if there is something there that we don't know about that could be maybe add another £1 million onto the bill, then that maybe the whole thing falls to pieces. And I think it's not unreasonable for us to examine the figures, given that they were only sort of suggested temporarily, and we were sort of told that we would get an updated figure, but if we don't have that information to hand, then I guess we can't do it, because it does really revolve around this value for money issue, which is a statutory requirement of the council to make sure that we do, and that's really, for me, is the key to it. I don't think it's any question we need a hub, but it's a question of how we provide it. So is there anybody else? Councillor Slade.
I just want to get 2 points of clarification. The first is, there was a suggestion that costs £14,000 to £21,000 a year to support people. Well, people with asthma or cancer or any other, it can cost thousands and thousands. I think it's a fallacy to talk about this. This is not about revenue. If we go all the way back to when this was first proposed, I'm pretty sure there was a £100,000 hole in the budget that would need to be found when we first, supported the original much lower budget. We already knew there was a hole in the revenue running costs of this. The revenue running costs about how much somebody's health needs are during the course of a year, or housing support needs are, is totally irrelevant. This is a capital project, and I am pretty sure that if we were to say to our residents, well, it's okay because your health costs are £10,000, and so we're going to build you a GP surgery at a cost based upon the number of that's fantasy land. 10,000 people use a GP surgery at the cost of £2, £3, £4 million. So it is comparing apples and pears, or apples and eggs. So I think we should not let anyone get confused by the revenue costs of supporting vulnerable people with the capital costs of buying a potential white elephant building. In terms of the building, can we just get some clarity? A member just suggested that we're talking about an increase in the budget of 800,000. I thought we were talking about a total budget capped at £800,000 to include the purchase, the remodelling, the renovation, and getting it to the point of opening. I note in the original paper
that the budget, the original budget, which was a lot lower than 800,000 a year ago, also included maintenance and management costs. So does the 800,000, is that for the purchase, the legal costs, the renovation, the remodelling, the management and contingency? All of that is in 800,000. And how much of that is going to be spent before you realise it can't possibly be done for that money? Because I want to understand what the potential abortive costs are going to be. Because I still think that we should have a full business case coming to Cabinet before anything more is done. And it's not the first time this year that we've had what sounds on the face of it to be a lovely idea, but absolutely no business case to support it. It's becoming a bit of common practice.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you want to provide the clarification to that, Councillor Allen, about what's actually included in that cost. My understanding was it was actually to buy it and to refurbish it and put it into a condition that it could be used, and the additional cost would be provided by the third-party operator. I think that was my understanding of it. I think you're nodding there, Councillor Allen. Is that right? Okay. So look. We've had a really good discussion. I know that there are two more want to speak, but we've had a really good discussion on this, really good debate, thrashed it to pieces. I think we've got to the bottom of most of the issues on here. So I think we've got to take two more speakers, and then I think we'll decide what it is, if anything, we want to do. Sorry. And the leader is back. Okay, and we'll have a. So we'll give. I think we'll give both Councillor Slade and the leader an opportunity to wind up. Yes, after the next two speakers. So, and I think Councillor Allison was first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So there was discussion earlier about whether or not this call-in meant that people don't support the hub. I just want to clarify my personal position on this. As far as I'm concerned, I think this is a fantastic idea. I'm completely sold on the fact that it would be brilliant. They would access people. It would allow people to access services who don't currently access services. I'm completely sold on actually being in the right location. I can even be convinced, even though we've not had any partnerships named, that you've got partners who are willing to help us. What I don't understand is why you don't just tell us how much it's going to cost and say we're funding it. If you'd have come to this meeting and said, you want to build this hub, it's going to be state of the art, it's going to cost £3 million, I would have said, fantastic, let's do it. I would be completely supportive of that. I just don't understand why, even though it's against the information we've got from officers, we're going ahead with this fallacy that we can deliver the project for £800,000. It isn't going to happen. Just tell us how much it's going to cost so that we can agree to build it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was really a couple of replies to what we've heard partly about this particular building, this particular church hall. We were told, I think one of the councillors said that Councillor Allen has told us, we've heard from Councillor Allen, why this building. No, actually, I think Councillor Allen has outlined her gut feeling about why this building. We haven't heard why this building, as opposed to another building in another place. And certainly as a hub, I agree. For Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, jolly handy it's in Bournemouth, but there is Christchurch, there is Poole. And I also don't feel that we have got the partners in place. We keep being told that. We haven't. We haven't got the most necessary partner, which is the CIC, who is going to bear a lot of the costs and apparently do the work far more cheaply than we could do. And on the setting the cost of this ambitious project against the cost that it takes to have, for example, looked after children, that doesn't even jibe, as I think Councillor Slade said. It's apples and oranges. I can't even guarantee that this will save one looked after child from being a looked after child. That isn't the point. It is to care for people who are already in this position. So I do feel, Chairman, that we haven't heard all the answers to all the questions that we had originally, however much we might like to be, we are told that we have. I still think it's going to cost a huge sum. I still think that although it's a very good idea, and I agree, it would be very good to be a force for good And yes, we are all aiming to be a force for good, but this is on public money. And this particular building is the building that I do not think is suitable under these conditions, with this huge cost that we don't even know the top of. We don't know the ceiling of it. And Councillor Rampton said it's a leap of faith, and I agree, it absolutely is a leap of faith, but it's a jolly expensive one. So I still feel the same as we did initially.
Thank you very much, Councillor Devon. Well, I think we've thrashed this to death now for this evening. I think my preference would be, as Councillor Slade said, for a business case to be made and brought back to Cabinet for decision, so we can look at it from an overview scrutiny perspective again. That would be my preference. But what I'd like to do now is to invite Councillor Mellows, who heard the debate, to sort of sum up, if he wishes to, and then followed by Councillor Slade. And we will then decide if we need to offer advice to the Cabinet or otherwise. So, Councillor Mellor, are you there? May I invite you to speak if you wish to?
Yes, I can, Chair. Thank you. I'm in my car, so I'll leave my camera off. Chair, thank you. It's been a really fun, really interesting debate, and I've thank members for it, and also our team who have presented on it. Look, to summarise, Chair, this is the right thing to do. I think we all agree that, in terms of the service we're trying to do, the ambition there, we're absolutely trying to deliver this, and it's the right thing to do. Is it the right building? Apart from a few of the councillors in this room, everybody is telling us that this is the right building. So it's the right thing to do. It's the right building. And have we got our value for money concerns organised properly? Well, yeah, absolutely, because we've capped the price at £800,000, or we won't do it. And if we don't get that, it's a partnership piece, it doesn't come forward, then then we won't do it either. So we've done, we are well aware of what we're trying to do. We're well aware of how it's been set up to do it. This is the right thing to do, and to do anything else, to delay this further. And Chair, I implore you in that, to delay this further when we've got something in front of it that says, if we can do this for £800,000, this is value, and this is value permanently for our community. If you take, 30 people over 800,000, around about, £26,000 a head, our partners, and us and our partners spend significantly more on that community and the wider, homelessness and at risk of homelessness community. It's not just about, is it financially the right thing to do? It absolutely is financially the right thing for us to do, but it's the right thing to do for these people. It's the right thing to do for anybody who, claims that they want our town centres to look nicer and to generate more pride in it, because we can't leave people, sleeping on the streets. We need to intervene. I implore you, this is a fantastic piece of work, and it is fantastic value. We will not proceed if it is not done in that value, Chair. So I think we've made our case clearly, and I hope members can see that.
Councillor Mellor, if I could just ask a question. I mean, given the debate we've had, and that you're not going to take any action until you've obtained an operator, suitable operator that can sort of step up to the plate and provide the services that will be expected there. Would there be any difficulty in bringing this back to Cabinet and overviewing scrutiny, so that we could actually see what the what the specification for the building actually will be, what will actually be in the building, what services will specifically be in there, and then what the total costs are, who's going to pay for what? Is there a problem in doing that?
Yes, there is, Chair, because we need to get on and do it. We need to get on and do it now. We should have got on and done it 6 months ago. We have vulnerable people we need to support now. We have a very, very clear plan that says we know exactly what we're trying to do. The officers know what they want to do. Our partners know what they want to achieve. There's 2 to 3 years of work going in across the partnership community. As Hazel said, they're ready tomorrow. They are in there tomorrow if we can complete this transaction. We cannot go through another cycle in this. If we can deliver it for £800,000 and at a partnership that is of the calibre we're expecting to be able to deliver it at, this is the right thing to do. If we can't do that, if we can't convince ourselves of that, we will not be proceeding, Chair. So you've got all the surety you need. Now's the time to get on and do it. Now's the time to deliver for our partners, for our community, and for that, particularly that homeless and vulnerable community. Now is not the time to go navel gaze about specifications. Now's the time to go and get this done.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader.
I'm sorry, Chair, I was just going to ask that the Leader has just said, if we can't do it, then we won't do it. Does he mean we won't buy this building, or does he mean we won't have a hub anywhere else? This building or no hub? Is that what he meant?
Did you hear that question?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. I mean, and the decision, you know, look, it's the decision is incredibly clear. We will have to come back to cabinet if we, you know, and council if we want to provide a service outside of a decision that's been taken by cabinet. The decision taken by cabinet is, can we proceed on the basis of a cap of £800,000? So we will not be proceeding on this if we cannot be assured of that, and we'll have to come back. If you know, so have confidence in the fact that, you know, if you believe this is the right thing to do, and you know you believe if we can do it with the right level of partnership for £800,000, it's the right thing to do. Move on with it. If you don't believe that, you know, then fine, you know, move something against it. But ultimately, we're very, very clear. We believe we can deliver this. Our partners, you know, we want to go out and formalise that relationship with them. As Hazel has said, who knows this better than anybody sitting in this room, they are ready to go. Let's get on and get this done. If we can't do it, you know, in the partnership sense, but we're expecting, if we can't do it for £800,000, we'll have to come back to the drawing board. But our aspiration is to do this. We think this is the best way to do it. We've been around the houses on it. You've had an excellent debate here this evening, and you've heard really passionately from people in there. I think it's really, really clear, Chair. If you have ambition to do this, we've got the protection around it in terms of the quality of partnership, and we've got the protection around it in terms of the £800,000. Now we need to just get on and do it.
Yeah, thank you. Just members, if you hang on just for a second. By Councillor Slade.
So I've seen the suggested recommendation that we don't offer advice on the basis that we have this assurance. I'm nervous actually about the urgency and the panic in the voice of the leader. At the end of the day, this isn't going to be delivered for £800,000. And actually, if you go back to the original work from last year, the multidisciplinary team can proceed regardless of the building. They're already working at the building. They have the health bus. We are looking after our homeless population 100 times better than we were 5 years ago. There is a lot of support out there from the public. There is a lot of support from the professionals. If this comes in at 800,050p, it's got to stop anyway. So you're not seriously telling me we're not going to do all this great work. The work is going to carry on. I'm not convinced that this building is, the due diligence has been done by the council. I accept that the partners think this is a great space, but this is the council that's taking the risk. Those partners are not offering to put their hands in their pocket and buy this building. They're expecting us to do that. And I'm afraid my concerns about us stepping in to somebody else's space to pick up the tab is just too risky. So I'm not content that we should just allow this to go back. I am of the opinion that whilst I accept that finding the first recommendation that we should seek somebody who is prepared to work to lead this, I think is absolutely sound. What I don't think is sound is the second recommendation, which is that we should encourage the property officer to go ahead and purchase this property, because I am not satisfied, and I do not believe that the property officer or the members have actually given us enough information about the market conditions and what else can be purchased for this increased purchase price compared to the purchase price that we were looking at from a year ago. I'm not convinced at all, and I don't think the second part of the Cabinet recommendation is sound around progressing with this site. I think we should look for a partner and get them to put forward a case that they would be able to, in principle, run this facility. But I think if the council are purchasing the property, then we have to be convinced that we've got the money for it. I'm not convinced.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Slade. Well, I'm going to make a motion now, and we'll see how it goes down. But I hope the second part of the motion will actually alleviate some of Councillor Slade's concern about the cost and the viability of the project, etc. And the motion is as follows: recommended that A, on the basis that the acquisition and refurbishment works will not commence until an operator has been selected and the total cost of the council will not exceed £800,000, that no advice be offered to the Cabinet at this time. B, upon the completion of the competitive selection process to appoint an operator of a health hub service, a report detailing the delivery plan, including all project costs, be submitted to Cabinet and Overview and Scrutiny Board for consideration. So I'm going to move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Okay, seconded by Councillor Allison. Is there anybody like to debate on that motion? Councillor Dedman, thank you.
As far as I understand it, Chairman, when you read that out, we are still confining ourselves to looking at this one building rather than a hub at somewhere with a partner. And that's the bit I'm objecting to. I think the building is going to be a white elephant. We are not meant to mention the clause that the councillor opposite me mentioned. But it is an onerous clause, I can assure you. I too have been in that position. I think that the concentration on this building is wrong, and I can't support you.
Yeah, I tend to agree about the building, but nevertheless, we've had a very powerful case presented, and the council's costs are contained. And this is the motion I put forward does give some visibility of what the overall project cost is going to be and where it will be apportioned, and that gives us another opportunity to look at it. Whereas currently, if there's no advice given, the decision is made and the Cabinet go ahead and we don't get an opportunity to look at it again. At least what I'm suggesting, it does give us, it won't inhibit the work or progress, but it will give us an opportunity to see, see what the total costs are likely to be. Councillor Devlin has just asked me to read that out again. Can you do that, Mr. Thank you. Whilst Richard's doing that, anybody else like to talk about it before I actually get to the vote on it? No? Okay, we'll just wait for it to come around when you've all got sight of it. Okay, have you all got it now? You're not on Teams. You're not on the Teams call. Okay. Sorry, just assumed you were. Okay. I will read it out again then. Okay. Everyone else happy? You've got the words in front of you. Okay, I'll read it out. Recommended that A, on the basis that the acquisition and refurbishment works will not commence until an operator has been selected and the total cost to the council will not exceed £800,000, that no advice be offered to Cabinet at this time. B, upon the completion of the competitive selection process to appoint an operator of a health hub service, a report detailing the delivery plan, including all project costs, be submitted to Cabinet and Overview and Scrutiny Board for consideration. Yeah, Councillor Rigby.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm mostly happy with that. The thing that it's not totally clear and I want to see in it is I think the next step is getting this the delivery together and having that competitive thing so we can actually see what's going to happen and having the plan in place. But the recommendation A and B, one isn't reliant upon the other. So with recommendation A, the money could be spent prior to overview and scrutiny seeing the actual plan being put in place. So would it be possible to tie them together so that it doesn't move forward until all the costs have come to overview and scrutiny in Cabinet rather than not linking them together, if that makes sense?
I think what we could do is get rid of the letter B and just read through into one recommendation. That would be possible. Any comments? Councillor Alison, would you be happy with that?
Yeah, I would be happy with that, yes. I was just contemplating whether or not it would be possible to add the exploration of other buildings, because I do share some of those concerns. It doesn't necessarily have to stop them from continuing the work as we are now. But
okay. In that case, we would be offering advice at this point. So, you know, if you want to come up with something different, please do. I'm prepared to amend the motion I put on the table if you come up with something that you want to put. I'm not sure what value that will add, because as we've heard, you know, hearts are pretty much set on this.
Okay, so the potential amendment would change A, being on the basis that the acquisition and refurbishment costs will not commence until operator has been selected. Total cost. Right. So overview and scrutiny are content that there is a commitment not to exceed £800,000 and that no cost will be incurred until an operator has been selected. However, they recommend asking our property team to ensure that there is no other suitable property available on the market in the event that this cannot be achieved within the budget, because the leader has told us if it doesn't get 800,000, it's not happening. Well, we wouldn't want everything to then stop, would we? So why not ask our property team to actually reassure us that the market has no other alternatives? I've got word from a commercial property expert that nobody has asked them. Nobody's asked them. This keeps happening. So I'm not, you know, we can be told until we're blue in the face there's nothing out there, but if nobody's actually asked the actual people who know their stuff, how can we be sure of that? So the comment is to say that whilst this is undertaken, we ask that additional search of the market is undertaken. I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
Okay, I think what we could probably do is leave A and B as it is and add an additional paragraph that says that calls for the estates team to investigate alternative commercial options whilst the selection process for the operator is being undertaken, and that is reported back through to overview and scrutiny.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Yeah. I don't know, did any... Sorry. So,
I think it's for the first your motion, but for the property part of it, I don't think I could support. So I'd rather just keep it as your original motion. I think we can vote for an A and B and C and keep it that way. Perhaps we could do it that way, but I don't think I go for the last part.
well, I'm going to withdraw my original motion, so you won't be required to vote on that. But I'm happy to add the additional recommendation in paragraph C to make sure that the other options are looked at and we do get an answer to that. I think it's not unreasonable that the estates team shouldn't be asked to do that and report back. So
I'm happy to second that.
Yeah. Okay. I don't suppose, Richard, did you get my words?
Chairman, can I just clarify? So
yes.
You withdrew your original motion, but yes. I think what you were suggesting that you now have an A, B and C.
Yes, correct.
So A was as you read it before.
Yes.
So on the basis that the acquisition and refurbishment works will not commence until an operator has been selected and the total cost of the council will not exceed £800,000, that no advice be offered to Cabinet at this time.
Yeah.
B, that officers of the estates team be requested to investigate alternative locations during the selection process. Okay, and then C, upon completion of the competitive selection process, to appoint an operator of a health hub service, a report detailing the delivery plan, including all project costs, be submitted to Cabinet and ONS board for consideration.
Again.
Sorry, Chairman, I was just chuntering. It does sound as though we are actually offering advice, although we've said we're offering no advice. Sorry, it's just...
Chairman, can I just clarify? So your role here is to actually determine whether you wish to offer advice. If you offer advice, the process of the selection exercise will stall, because the Cabinet officers cannot progress that until Cabinet have reconsidered it. So if you include that as, I mean, you could say that the portfolio holder be requested to ask officers to continue to investigate, for instance, in that recommendation B. But at least if you don't offer advice, the officers can continue now with that selection process to progress the scheme.
Thank you for the explanation. I understand. Thank you.
So I'm happy with the recommendation as you amended on that basis. Could you just send it round again, please?
Recommendation B on the original becomes C. So what Richard is doing is inserting the request for the portfolio holder to ask the estates team to investigate the market to ensure there is an alternative should the budget exceed 800,000 is going in as item B, so that C then assumes that A is successful and B is not necessary, and therefore C is that once it's gone ahead, the delivery plan must come back to Overview Scrutiny Board and Cabinet. That's my understanding of it.
I've just circulated again on the Teams chat. Chairman, I wonder, whilst you have it on the table, I don't know whether any officers are on the call who may wish to contribute or feedback in terms of the implications of what is currently before you, or the portfolio holders.
Yeah, is the chief executive still there?
Yes, Chairman. Sorry, and I'm just trying to it depends on what you're trying to achieve. So A is fine. I understand that. B, understand that as well. That's fine. C, are you trying to achieve that? Because what you said is upon completion of the competitive selection process, a report should be considered. That doesn't say that Cabinet should be asked to make the decision to proceed or not. So on that basis, the decision could go ahead and a report be submitted after the event. Or are you asking, or are you recommending, shall I say, that Cabinet should be asked to take that decision rather than the decision being taken under the delegation?
Yes. Yeah, I think we're talking about Cabinet.
But so that might be a clearer set of words, might it? Upon completion of the competitive process to appoint an operative health hub, the Cabinet be asked to take that decision. Now, the challenge for us will be how that fits. Because if you say to Cabinet to ask to take the decision, then by virtue of the fact that overview and scrutiny meets beforehand, you can always look at it through overview and scrutiny. So you don't need to specify that. You can if you want to. But if that's what you're trying to achieve, then I think the words need to be a bit clearer. That's what you want to do. And then we just need to think about, and this is what I'm looking to the other officers for views, given the Cabinet cycles, does that cause an insurmountable problem in terms of a further delay on the process? Because it'll add a 4-week process just by virtue of issuing a report and then making it before we make a decision.
Yeah, can I just come in on that? To be honest, I really think that it should be a Cabinet decision. You know, we functioned perfectly well for 18 months with decisions being taken by Cabinet, collective responsibility. There's no reason why it should go to a portfolio holder decision. Ultimately, presumably the same way as we put in a special meeting, it'd be perfectly possible for Cabinet to put in a special meeting given the appropriate number of days' notice. So if this doesn't fit with this Cabinet cycle, have an extra Cabinet meeting. I think for something that's such a lot of money, you know, a cynic might suggest that the figure is less than £1 million in order that it does circumvent a decision needing to go higher. I think it's reasonable for us to say we do not feel that this should be delegated, and we would like it to go to Cabinet. That's not unreasonable. If it requires an extra Cabinet meeting, so be it.
Lorraine Mealings, you wanted to come in, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just a comment about timescales in terms of the recommendation for it going back to Cabinet. I think there will inevitably be a delay because of writing a report and checking it and everything, and just making sure we're aware of the risk of related to the acquisition because of that further delay. I'm not saying whether it's the right or wrong thing to do, but that would be a risk that we'd have to bear in mind, I think.
Jess Gibbons. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I actually wanted to come in on the point of the hub and concerns that have been raised around that. And one of the things, officers, we have discussed as part of the procurement process is to allow alternative bids within the tender process, which means an operator could come forward and say, well, for that sum of money, I could deliver exactly the outcomes you're looking for at an alternative location, which speaks to Councillor Slade's point regarding what other market locations there are. Now, that would obviously they'd have to submit data and evidence behind that and be able to convince us that that was appropriate. But there is that option in order to address that point.
If that were the case, then surely that reinforces the need to bring it back to Cabinet if that's an option that would be available to operators of the hub.
So that wouldn't require a Cabinet decision necessarily. Could be under delegated authority.
Chairman, if I can, I think when I was drafting or I was putting that C together based on your words, my assumption was that it would not be seeking approval of Cabinet and ONS if the overall project costs were below 800,000. It would be for your information, effectively, in consideration at that point. It would only, I think, would only need cabinet approval if it was to exceed the 800,000, which has already been said that the 800,000, if it's below 800,000, you already have, cabinet has an executive resolution to implement those decisions. So my view was that it would only come to ONS and cabinet for, well, technically ONS, you don't even have to put it to cabinet. It could come to ONS as you're in your overview and scrutiny role to just keep an eye on the overall budget costs, and therefore the project could proceed. Clearly, if it was to exceed 800,000, it would have to go back to cabinet for further approval, or council if it exceeded other limits. In which case you could then review that under your own timetable anyway.
Yeah, I guess if it came in as a report to overview and scrutiny, we could then decide what we wanted to do with it. We could put it to full council if we wanted to. I mean, you know, it's up to us to decide what we would want to do with that information. But and it's pointless, you know, asking for a report that's going to ensure that the project costs are contained with £800,000 because the council's already said that it won't go above that anyway. So, you know, why stop that process? If that's the limit, that's the limit. So I think we could take the cabinet. We could take the cabinet out of the paragraph and have the report to overview and scrutiny. We can then either take it back to cabinet or whoever at the time if we felt that the project was at risk. You know, not you know, because of the overall costs that we would have been identified then, which won't just be council costs, it'll be the costs for everything that needs to be put in there. That's the key to it, because that presents the risk to being able to provide the service. So yeah, I'd be happy with that personally.
Yeah. Just for clarity, we've got a new recommendation, which says that we are effectively content to keep it within that envelope of £800,000, that no acquisition and refurbishment works are done until an operator has been selected and that envelope is not exceeded, therefore no advice being offered, therefore not delaying. B, that the portfolio holder requested to request officers from the estates team, there's another request there, portfolio be requested to ask officers from the estates team to investigate, so we can take out the third be requested, to investigate alternative locations during the selection process. Upon completion of the competitive selection process, to appoint an operator, a report detailing the delivery plan, including project costs, be submitted to overview and scrutiny board for consideration. That has got three parts. I'm very happy to second that recommendation and take it to the vote. Everyone is content.
Okay. Is that exactly,
so the only other wording change there, Richard, is in item B, is the portfolio holder be requested to request officers of the estates team, remove the third be requested, and change to investigate alternative locations during the selection process as a backup. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's it. That's now changed.
Okay.
I'm happy to second that.
Okay, well, I'm happy with that, and that's the slate and square. Any more discussion on that motion? If there's no more, we'll take a vote on that. Okay, those in favour? Seven, 4. Those against? 1 against. Abstentions? 3. So that motion is carried. Thank you. Which I think, I don't think there's any need now, Richard, to say what the next steps are. I believe the recommendation speaks for itself.
Indeed, Chairman, but just to clarify for the officers and those online, you're not making any formal advice at this point back to Cabinet, so that it won't delay the progression of any works that and selection activities that need to take place.
Okay, members, that's all we have on the agenda for this evening, and so thank you for your participation. Thank you to our portfolio holders, leader of the council, and officers that are in attendance this evening. That was quite a session, wasn't it? We could talk it to death. Anyway, you can get on with it now in accordance with the decision the Cabinet's made. but we'll look forward to seeing that report come back to us in due course. And if there are any, anything of any concern, then we'll be coming back to you with recommendations as and if required. So thank you very much. With that, I will close the meeting. Thank you.